Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I still can't believe the crazy night I had last Halloween. I had spent weeks planning out my decorations and props, so excited to have the best decorated house in the neighborhood. I must have spent hundreds of dollars on blow-up ghosts, tombstones, skeletons, cobwebs, you name it. On October 30th, I took the entire day off work just to get everything set up. I started stringing fake cobwebs on the trees in the front yard, making sure they hung down nice and low for a spooky effect. I lined the driveway with homemade gravestones I had carved, each one inscribed with creepy epitaphs like "Rest in Pieces" and "Warm Food." For the front walkway, I had gotten a fog machine that I set up to blast eerie mist across the path to the porch. The porch itself I decorated with giant plastic spiders, more webbing, and a motion-activated ghoul that would suddenly start cackling from a rocking chair when people walked by. But the real pièce de résistance was the army of massive blow-up ghosts, vampires, and jack-o'-lanterns that I staked around the perimeter of the yard. Those things were like 7 feet tall. Lit up at night, they were an awesome and kind of terrifying sight. By the time I finally finished as the sun was going down, I was exhausted but thrilled. The house looked amazing, better than I ever could have imagined. I imagined crowds of neighborhood kids wide-eyed with awe and delight at my epic Halloween display. After admiring my handiwork, I dragged myself to bed around midnight, excited for all the reactions the next day. I fell into an exhausted sleep, fantasizing about all the neighborhood kids being wowed by my epic Halloween display. But around 2 a.m., I was startled awake by the sound of loud laughter and ripping noises coming from outside. I lay there confused in my sleepy daze, not comprehending what I was hearing at first. As more tearing and shredding sounds filled the air, I realized with horror that it sounded like wanton destruction. Adrenaline coursing through me, I leaped out of bed and ran to the window. In the moonlight, I saw to my utter dismay that my precious decorations were being ripped apart and vandalized. 3 teenage figures were gleefully shredding the ghosts and smashing jack-o'-lanterns while cackling with cruel delight. I watched helplessly as they grabbed handfuls of cobwebs and skeleton parts, looting all my hard work. Before I could even get outside, the teens had finished their wave of destruction. Arms loaded with the remains of my props, they slunk away into the night, leaving my yard utterly demolished in their wake. I threw on clothes and shoes haphazardly and raced outside to survey the full extent of the damage. It was like a Halloween war zone. The giant blow-up ghosts lay flat and deflated, slowly wheezing out their last breaths of air through gaping holes. The motion-activated ghoul was decapitated, its severed cackling head tossed into the bushes like trash. Gravestones were smashed into pieces and bones from skeletal decorations were scattered everywhere. No decoration had been spared from the ruthless vandalism. My rage and despair were overwhelming. I had spent weeks planning this perfect Halloween display, only to have it sadistically destroyed right before the big day by some heartless teenagers. All my money and hard work wasted. I immediately called 911 to report the vandalism, pacing in agitation as I waited for police to arrive. About 20 minutes later, a squad car pulled up, and 2 officers stepped out to inspect the damage. I gave them every detail, from the malicious laughter to the teens fleeing with armloads of Halloween remains. But, as expected, by the time the police arrived, the vile vandals were long gone without a trace. Dejected, I slowly started to clean up the wreckage, dragging popped ghosts and gathering busted tombstone pieces to throw away. What was I going to do now? My entire Halloween was ruined. As I was stacking the last of the garbage to take to the curb, I suddenly heard a scraping noise coming from the backyard. I froze, listening intently, and there it was again. A kind of scuffling, skittering sound moving through the dry leaves. An animal, maybe. But as I strained my eyes peering into the darkness, I saw a shadowy figure detach itself from a tree and creep slowly across the lawn. Too small and hunched to be a person, it moved in a strange, jerky gait that raised the hairs on my neck. My blood turned to ice as I realized this was no animal. Gripped by fear, I abandoned the trash pile and raced inside, locking the door and checking that every window was secured. I didn't know what that thing lurking in my yard was, but I knew it wasn't natural. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, patrolling the house and glancing fearfully out into the darkness. But I never saw that freakish figure again. Maybe it had just been curious and moved on once I was inside. Still, its presence left me deeply unnerved. When daylight finally came, I was bleary-eyed and jittery from no sleep. Surveying the ruins of my decorations, I was tempted to just give up on Halloween. After the vandals and that lurking creature, I was so demoralized I just wanted to turn off the porch light and hide. But as the day went on, kids in costume began coming by, filling the air with delighted chatter about candy tricks and scares. Seeing their excitement, I realized I couldn't let the bad guys win. So I rallied what decor I could salvage and did my best to get the house ready. No blow-ups or fog machine, but I managed to decorate a bit with the intact tombstones, spiders, and cobwebs. It was a far cry from my original plan, but when the costumed crowds came through that night, the kids didn't seem to mind. I have to admit, though, I was on edge the whole night, one eye on the trick-or-treaters and one eye warily scanning the shadows, watching for any sign of those prowling teens or that creepy little creature. Thankfully, neither seemed to return, and the night passed uneventfully. By the end, I was drained but satisfied that I had pulled together some Halloween spirit despite the setbacks. I still can't believe I fell for the dumbest prank ever last week. Halloween was over a week away still, and I was using up vacation days to get the house ready for all-out haunted mansion status. I'm talking floating ghosts, giant animated spiders, a fog machine going way overboard as usual. My buddy James and I always try to outdo each other with decorations. Last year he turned his house into a graveyard and I made mine look like a deranged circus. So this year I was converting my place into a full-on supernatural zone, determined to blow James away. I spent all Monday rigging up a motion-activated specter that would rise from the porch railing and cackle at visitors. Tuesday I strung cobwebs everywhere, covering the entryway, trees, bushes. Anything that stood still. Creepy portraits with eyes that seemed to follow you went up in the hallway. By Wednesday I was wiring tiny strobe lights into the shrubbery to simulate unearthly energies. I was on the front lawn Thursday afternoon putting some finishing gory touches on a bloody corpse mannequin I was making. I had ordered the lifelike dummy online and was now meticulously painting bloody gashes and bruises on its plastic skin to make it look freshly mutilated. As I stepped back to admire my creation, the doorbell suddenly rang. I set down my paints and brushes and headed inside, wondering who could be stopping by unannounced. When I opened the front door, there was no one standing there, but I looked down to see a medium-sized box sitting on the welcome mat. It was wrapped in shiny black paper and had a bright orange ribbon tied around it in a big bow, very Halloween-esque. There was no tag or card indicating who the package was from or what it contained. For a moment, I just stared at it in confusion, racking my brain trying to remember if I had ordered anything recently. Then it hit me, this must be a surprise delivery from my buddy James. James and I have had an ongoing contest for years trying to create the most over-the-top Halloween decorations and displays. He was always ordering crazy new props online or making elaborate animatronics by hand. We'd send each other our latest projects and purchases as inspiration and motivation. Based on the spooky wrapping, I instantly assumed this mystery box was a new gadget or decoration that James had found and express shipped to me to use in my own Halloween decorations. He was always excitedly messaging me about some wild new mechanical prop he discovered. Knowing James, it was probably something completely freaky and macabre, like an animatronic zombie dog or a possessed baby doll. Something twisted and creepy that would be perfect for my haunted house decor. That was exactly the kind of outrageous props James loved discovering. Grinning eagerly, I snatched the box off the porch and kicked the front door shut behind me. I was pumped to see what bizarre new decoration James had sent my way this time. Whatever it was, I knew it would be the perfect final touch to really take my Halloween display over the top. I carried the box inside, feeling like a kid on Christmas morning about to open the best present ever. I could practically hear the demonic sounds or blood-curdling screams that would come out of this mystery package. This was just what I needed to make my haunted house the ultimate Halloween experience. I tore through the paper like a kid at Christmas, imagining how I could integrate this mysterious new prop into the decor. As I ripped open the flaps, a pressurized canister of bright blue paint exploded right in my face. I yelped and stumbled backward, blinded as the thick paint soaked my hair and clothes. Wiping the dripping paint from my eyes, I sputtered curses and peered into the box, where I could see the empty paint can ready to burst out when opened. It finally hit me. This was clearly not a gift from James after all. Someone had pulled a freaking prank on me. I was seeing red, both figuratively and literally, from paint-tinged vision. Some wise guy thought it was hilarious to mess with my Halloween preparations as a joke. Oh, so funny. When I found out who did this, there would be hell to pay. I stormed to the bathroom to clean up, but the paint had already hardened onto my skin and crusted in my hair. No amount of harsh scrubbing removed the stubborn blue stains from my face and neck. My clothes were a lost cause, probably permanent tie-dyed relics for the rest of time. Over the next few days, no matter how much I scrubbed, I still had faint blue tinges on my forehead and around my ears, a lingering reminder of the stupid prank. And every time I saw my reflection, my anger reignited. Who was the jerkwad who pulled this stunt? I racked my brain trying to think of likely culprits. A couple of weeks ago at a bar, some loudmouth I barely knew had mocked my Halloween obsession, saying real men don't decorate. After I told him off, he got pissed and stormed away drunk. Had to be him trying to get back at me. As the week went on, I outfitted the house with trip wires, alarms, and cameras to catch any other pranking attempts. I was on edge on Halloween as I handed out candy, flinching at every branch scrape against the house, but nothing happened. Maybe it really was just a one-time stupid joke. After I turned off the decorations that night, exhausted but accomplished, I was heading to bed when a crash came from the backyard, followed by laughter and receding footsteps. Fuming, I grabbed a bat and sprinted outside, but the prankster was long gone. I spent an hour scouring the yard for damage or clues, but found nothing amiss. Still, now I knew whoever pulled the paint stunt was still lurking around for more. I remember that the night my house got egged on Halloween by some punk teenager, and I'm still mad about it. I had spent the entire month of October getting ready for the big night and making sure my twin boys had the best costumes ever. Both my kids, Max and Miles, wanted to dress up as something scary this year. After long debates, Max decided on a zombie football player, while Miles was set on being a vampire hockey player. I took a week off work in late October to have time to really perfect their costumes. For Max, I started with a jersey and shoulder pads to look like a football player. Then I spent hours using fabric paint and fake blood to make the clothes look tattered and caked in gore. I added bony prosthetics to make his arms look rotted to the bone. Gruesome face makeup came next, with gaping bloody gashes and exposed brains painted on his skin. For the final touch, I made him a helmet covered in blood and brain matter. Miles took more work, since vampires are old-school spooky rather than outright disgusting like a zombie. I tracked down an awesome vintage hockey jersey and pads online. His helmet I painted black with jagged fangs dripping blood around the edges. Using white and gray makeup, I made his face look pale and undead. I used special effects gel to make sinister bloody bite marks on his neck. Fangs completed the costume for that true Nosferatu look. By Halloween Eve, both their costumes had come together even better than I imagined. Max looked like he had just stumbled off a football field now littered with the remains of his devoured teammates. Miles resembled a centuries-old vampire newly risen from his coffin, ready to stalk the night attacking victims. Needless to say, when I finally unveiled their finished costumes, the boys were hollering with gory glee. Halloween morning, they could barely contain their excitement as I helped them into the bloody jerseys and gory pads. Their grandmother had promised to take them trick-or-treating around the neighborhood that night. I gave Max and Miles strict instructions not to wipe off any of the fake blood and guts before they went out. Then I sent them off with big bags for candy, kissing their cold, undead cheeks before watching them join my mom on the darkened street. It was almost sundown, and our neighborhood would soon be swarming with kids and parents. I had 4 huge bowls brimming with every candy variety: Snickers, Reese's, Kit Kats, Twix, and more. I couldn't wait to see all the creative costumes. As darkness fell, the first groups of costumed kids came ringing the doorbell, holding out their bags eagerly. Princesses, superheroes, and monsters filed by for the next few hours as I steadily gave out candy. Around 10 p.m., the flow of trick-or-treaters finally dwindled to a stop. To my dismay, when I peeked into the candy bowls, only a few stray mini candy bars and lollipops remained. I hoped no other groups came by, since I hated to disappoint. Just as I was turning off the lights, the doorbell rang again. With a sigh, I opened the door, holding my nearly emptied bowl. On the steps stood a lone teenage boy, probably 15 or 16, dressed all in black with a skull mask. I swallowed my irritation and politely told the older kid that I was very sorry, but I had run out of candy except for a couple leftovers. He just stood there silently staring at me through the mask eye holes. After an awkward few moments, I nodded politely and began slowly closing the door. Suddenly he snarled, "Whatever, lady," in a bratty tone and stomped off the porch toward the street. Relieved this last encounter was over, I watched him walk down the path, but instead of leaving, he paused under a streetlight and looked back toward the house. To my shock, I saw him pull something large from his candy bag. It was unmistakably a carton of eggs. My jaw dropped as I realized his intentions. Sure enough, he grabbed an egg and hurled it directly at my front door, where it splattered sickeningly. I yelled for him to stop, but he was clearly determined to vandalize my house. His supply seemed endless as egg after egg sailed through the darkness and exploded on my siding with eggy smacks. By the time I got down the steps, the rotten teen had crushed the entire carton against the house and was fleeing down the road. I stood there fuming in the street, surrounded by dripping egg shrapnel sliding down the walls. What kind of entitled punk egged someone's house just because he didn't get free candy? I was seeing red, but knew I had to document the vandalism for any potential charges or claims. So I spent over an hour taking photos and videos of the egg splatter patterns from multiple angles. All that time, my blood simmered thinking about the smug teen who had done this. If I ever found out who he was, his parents were getting a bill. Just then, my mom's minivan pulled up with the boys bouncing inside. Their delighted faces fell when they saw me hosing egg guts off the front steps at nearly midnight. I quickly explained and assured them we still had an epic candy stash. After they went to bed with visions of chocolate dancing in their heads, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and still livid. This was supposed to be a night of Halloween joy and community, but one arrogant brat had to ruin it over something so petty. In the following days, I learned from neighbors that this teen had egged multiple homes up and down the block after candy ran out. The police brushed it off as harmless mischief, but I was bothered. The vandalism and entitlement bugged me. I complained to anyone who would listen about the absurdity of it all. My sister tried to gently say it was just a dumb teenage prank, but to me it represented a bigger issue of spoiled kids thinking they could do whatever they want without consequences. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.